Loving, which is inspired by, based on a true story of an American marriage which challenged, racist, what we call miscegenation laws. And very...
What was that word?
Miscegenation, a horrible, horrible word.
Okay.
So an impressive, very, very impressively low-key work based on a true story. Ruth Negga is up for Best Actress Oscar for her portrayal of Mildred Jeter, I think was her maiden name, who is the pregnant bride of a proud labourer, Richard Loving, played by Joel Edgerton. At the beginning of the film, we see them sort of young couple, romantically involved with this beginning that almost kind of calls to mind the sort of world of American graffiti. And very, very early on, he takes her out to a field to show her the plans for something that he wants to build. Here's a lovely early clip.
I want to put the kitchen right back here.
Richard, stop this. I don't know what you're saying.
I bought it. This whole acre. I'm gonna build you a house. Right here. Our house. Mildred.
Yes?
Would you marry me?
She says yes, and they decide that in order to be married, the easiest thing to do would be to go to Washington, D.C., where apparently there was going to be less paperwork. So they go to D.C. They then return to Virginia to build the home that he has described for her, the home that he has planned out, the home for which he has laid the foundations, only to be arrested and told that their marriage is illegal, that it is an interracial marriage that goes against the laws of the land, and that they have to leave. And if they don't leave, they will go to prison for substantial amounts of time. She's pregnant at the point at which they're arrested, and it's traumatic early scenes. And they then essentially have to flee, and they have to flee and move away to leave behind the place that they grew up, the place where all these plans, the place that they had basically were going to build their home. Being very private people, that seems to be the end of it. But then a letter that she has written to Bobby Kennedy brings the American Civil Liberties Union on board. And they then approach the Lovings and say, look, we think you've got a case. We think that this is a case that could actually go all the way to the Supreme Court. And the rest of the film is then about the way in which their marriage and that case goes up through the chain of the American legal system. But what's really interesting about the film is that it absolutely avoids becoming a film about a legal case. It's directed and written by Jeff Nichols. And what Jeff Nichols does is to make a film which is as understated as the couple that it centrally portrays. We meet them first. We see them as people first, as young lovers first, and we become interested in them as that. We then see them get caught up in something which is beyond, it is not to do with their relationship, it is to do with the place in which they live and the time in which they live and the politics that surround them. But it's not them. And the film then does this really interesting sort of juggling act of keeping its focus on them whilst the story of their relationship gradually becomes something which becomes a media story, becomes a magazine story, becomes a political story, becomes something that will have huge historic, effects. And yet something in which they are essentially attempting to retain their private life. And it's funny because I know that there are some reviews I've read that say that the problem with the film is that it doesn't, it never has the big moments. It doesn't build to, you can't handle the truth and all that stuff, which you kind of expect from these things. And actually that is true, but it's also that is the strength of it. The strength of it is, and the more I think about it, you know, often you watch a film and it has to settle in your mind. It's the more you think about it in the week or so after you've seen it that you kind of start to realise what its sort of true virtues are. The more I think about it, the more I think that the really powerful thing about the film is that it behaves, as far as I can tell, in the way that its protagonists behave. That it is, you know, it is strong and proud, but it is also private. It is also a film that's centrally about a relationship between two people who, as I said, you meet them, you get to know them, you get to love them, and you therefore care about them on a personal level whilst the whole political thing is going on around them. And what Nichols is very careful to do is to ensure that they don't simply become a pawn in their own story. There is a difference, certainly, in terms of their attitudes towards it. She thinks, look, this is important, we have to do this. The phrase he gives is, we don't bother anyone, we won't bother anyone. And he wants more and more to not be sort of part of this kind of, this media storm. And it is a very interesting and brave way of approaching that story, because heaven knows that cinema's tendency is to go the other way, to turn everything up to 11, to build everything up to huge, big, emotional climaxes. And the fact that the film doesn't do that actually sort of, you know, focuses it on their relationship, on them, on moments of them holding hands whilst driving in a car, whilst also leaving you rightly outraged by laws which need changing. And so it has, you know, this absolutely solid progressive message, but it is first and foremost a film about them, which I think is quite impressive.